Right, so, okay, I'm sure you're very aware that I've got a little bit of a man crush on Joe Rogan, and for good reason. You see, I've been listening to his podcast for probably about 9 or 10 years now, and it has had an enormous influence on me. In fact, it's the reason that I had the balls to go and try stand-up comedy for the first time, leading to my future career. It's the reason that I started the ketogenic diet to help with my epilepsy, which in turn helped me lose 34 kilos. It's why I have such a passion for MMA and why I started training jiu-jitsu as well. Many of the things that have happened in my life, including this YouTube channel, has a direct line to the one and only Joe Rogan. So for a man that I've never met, I certainly do owe him a lot. And for those of you wondering, do I have a big old stiffy over Joe? You better fucking believe it. And that's why what is happening right now in the media, the attack upon Joe Rogan is fucking ridiculous, hilarious, and all kinds of fucked up. Many of us are aware that earlier this year Joe Rogan signed a deal with Spotify for $100 million US plus, you know, probably some stocks and all this type of stuff, which is going to keep Joe's family fed and housed comfortably for generations to come, which is great for them. Well fucking done. But what many of you won't be aware of is that many of the people who work at Spotify fucking hate Joe and everything that he stands for. Coincidentally, probably they hate me as well. They just don't know who I am. Yet. Coincidentally, they've probably never listened to Joe Rogan talk, other than maybe one podcast here or a 10-minute clip there, and they've never really understood what the man is about. You see, you can learn a lot about a person in a 3-hour podcast, much of which you would never learn about them in a 10-minute clip. That's why I enjoy doing my podcast so much. It gives people the understanding that I'm not just some fucking lunatic who stares down the barrel of the camera 3 days a week just screaming at people. But people form these opinions very quickly. They read one article, they listen to one video, and they change their opinion of someone who they have no idea about. This whole thing took a new step forward when Joe made the move to Spotify at the start of this month, and some episodes couldn't be found. According to Variety, Joe Rogan podcast comes to Spotify, but it's missing his episodes with far-right figures. It turns out they were added, it just took a little bit of extra time. There are a lot of podcasts and apparently they were uploading them in sections. But people blew up. They were very angry about that. They were angry for two reasons and two different sides. One group, the Joe Rogan fans, were angry because they didn't upload the episodes in general. The other group were angry because they even existed. Because you're not allowed to have conversations with people who you don't agree with, ever! But you can definitely take everything that Variety says with a grain of salt, because they played their hand pretty early in this fight with this quote that was also in that article. Spotify announced the arrival of Joe Rogan's podcast in a tweet on Tuesday, calling him a stand-up comic, a mixed martial artist fanatic, and a psychedelic adventurer, neglecting to call out one significant element of his brand: a political provocateur, one who has been willing to provide a platform for the far-right fringe. Ooh.
I'm not gonna stand here and listen to you badmouth the greatest podcast the world has ever known.
Now, just a few points here. Joe has had an enormous array of people on his podcast. Lots of people from the right, lots of people from the middle, lots of people from the left, and some people who you may consider far right. But here's one thing that you may have noticed, is that no one from the far left has ever really been on his podcast. Some people around the fringe, but no one really on the far left, Antifa, cops bad, all that type of bullshit. And I think the reason for that is, well, they don't ever want to talk to people. They just spout their nonsense from places like Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or any platform where they can get their little cronies around them and they all freak out about the world in their own little echo chamber. But they will not have long-form debates or conversations with people who don't necessarily agree with their points of view. And that is where Joe is different. He has all different types of people on. People who agree with him, people who disagree with him, and some people who agree and disagree in different parts. And isn't that the most important part of a podcast? Is to talk to someone about things that you may or may not agree upon. I have that same thing on my podcast. Sometimes I agree with people, sometimes I don't. And we talk it out. Like humans should. Rather than just freaking out if someone says something that you don't necessarily agree with, and you freak the fuck out. And you just fucking scream and cry and want to get them cancelled and banned and removed from the earth. Also, political provocateur, the reason they're saying this is because he said this about presidential candidate Joe Biden.
You have to be able to call out shit that's wrong on your side. And this is one of the problems that the Democratic Party's having right now with this Joe Biden guy. You guys got to be able to call it out. You can't let this slide because everybody else sees it, and Trump is going to eat him alive. He's going to eat that guy alive. The guy can barely remember what he's talking about while he's talking.
And you're telling me that's not being honest? Fucking look at this.
Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
We choose science over fiction. We choose truth over facts. Think about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
But Joe does have political power. In a recent podcast, he just off the cuff said, I'd love to do a debate with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, a 3-4 hour debate where he's in the middle and they're all talking to each other. And Trump loved the idea. Joe never really responded about it, as to this point anyway, and he was never questioned about it at rallies because all of his little journalists that follow him around just refuse to ask him any hard questions because they know his brain will explode. Now, I don't necessarily love Donald Trump, and I don't necessarily hate Joe Biden. What I do hate is that particular political party, the Democrats, they fucked off Tulsi Gabbard without even giving her a chance. And she was a fucking good candidate, and if you look into who she is, you'll know what I'm saying. Anyway, that's my opinion on the US election. It's through this and through other issues bravely raised by publications like Vice, a group of journalists who are known for being extremely unbiased and writing some of the greatest pieces of journalism that you have ever seen. Hang on, I've got a response to Vice. Just give me 1 second. This cost me not too much money, but it was enough.
Fuck you to the moon, Vice, you cock smokers.
That was the best $100 I've ever spent. Spotify CEO defends keeping transphobic Joe Rogan podcasts online. In a Spotify all-hands company meeting on Wednesday, Spotify CEO Daniel Ek defended keeping transphobic content. Transphobic according to fucking who? From hugely popular podcaster Joe Rogan on the audio platform. This hoorah happened after a podcast that Joe did with Abigail Schreier. I did a podcast with her as well. You can check it out. By the way, Butterfield Effect every single Thursday. Go and check it out on Spotify for the time being, and YouTube as well. Abigail raises some very interesting points, and I think it's important to at least listen to her and then come to the conclusion within yourself, rather than just freaking out about the fact that she exists. This is not how we deal with these things in a logical or free speech creative environment. It's important to grow these ideas and look at them subjectively and work out what you really believe, rather than just hearing a 4-second clip and going, that's what I fucking believe! Abigail's comments and thoughts and her book is compelling. Whether or not it's all correct, it's a conversation that should be had. Now, for those of you who've never heard Joe Rogan talk about trans people, you may be thinking, okay, Joe is a transphobic person. But really, what he has said, and I jotted them down because they're quite full on, let people do whatever they want, as long as it doesn't hurt others. But biological men fighting biological women in sports like MMA definitely is not stopping others hurting others. Right? That makes complete fucking sense. That's all Joe said about it. And perhaps that young people shouldn't be having hormone replacement therapy at 6 years fucking old. Is that not completely fair to suggest all that? No! Send that transphobic bald-headed prick to the gulag immediately! And the hatred for Joe Rogan, the transphobic king, was only cemented by the goddess herself.
Joe Rogan, this is not the first time he's said things like this. He's a homophobic, transphobic ass. And he calls my family, especially the girls, crazy bitches. And he does this all the time.
And now, after all this, we get to the reason I wrote this video. Spotify employees reportedly want editorial control over Joe Rogan's podcasts. Oh, for fuck's sake, this is why we can't have nice things. Leaked inside information indicates that Spotify employees may be asking for greater editorial control over Joe Rogan's podcast. While it seems like an unlikely move, one that wouldn't be popular with viewers, it might also be possible under Spotify's content rules. Why are people of this generation so weak? They cannot deal with people who slightly disagree with them, although probably have many of the same beliefs and thoughts. Have a conversation. Joe doesn't hurt anybody by these podcasts. And whether or not you agree with them or not, that doesn't fucking matter. This is what free speech is all about. The ability to have conversations is so fucking important. If you are constantly controlled by the thought police, which is the woke media, which is all these people sitting in Spotify with blue hair and fucking 16 different genders on their driver's license, freaking the fuck out, they are the thought police. If you ever read 1984, well, they've just stormed in on Joe/Winston and taken him to room 101 because this is what they're trying to do. Thankfully, it won't happen. Joe has a lot of power. He has a lot of powerful friends. Like the old Batsman. Like and subscribe! Rogan claims to simply be speaking his mind and even makes a rare apology if proven wrong about a topic. According to Digital Music News, employees are now seeking greater editorial control following some of Spotify employees have complained about a recent episode requesting to be taken down. That's the Abigail Schreier episode. According to Vice, fuck you Vice, a town hall meeting was held to discuss the issue. Apparently, Spotify CEO Daniel Ek acknowledging Spotify's own responsibility to moderate its content. Fuck that hurt. Ek was said to mention 10 other meetings about Rogan recently. This could be an ongoing issue. But what would happen if Trump and Biden did go on Joe Rogan's podcast? Or in fact, what about this? What if you hate Joe and Trump went on his podcast after he wins or loses the next election? And you find out that 3 hours into that podcast that Donald Trump loves knitting and you love knitting. And all of a sudden, you found common ground about something that you can both get on about. Isn't that important to feel attached to someone, even if you disagree with their political leanings or things they've done in their past? At least if you can find that middle ground, you can start to have a conversation. You can find the middle ground and realize you're both human and perhaps you can connect on other issues. That's why Joe Rogan's podcast is so important. That's why I'm defending every single thing that he has said on that podcast, because it's all about free speech. You should be able to say whatever the fuck you want. You should be open to criticism, my word, but you should be able to say it. Ladies and gentlemen, be a good motherfucker. Peace in the Middle East. Me dick stinks. Keep it moist. And I'll see you all very soon. Toodaloo, bye.